Thank you for having me back to talk with you again. I've been to Loudon Wildlife Conservancy um, maybe three or two or three times or three or four times in the past. And it's always a lot of fun to visit. I'm sorry I can't be there in real life now, but I feel sort of like I'm getting accustomed now to just seeing all the little faces and boxes. So it's great to see everybody here. And I'm going to go ahead and hopefully share my screen. You're all seeing my screen now, right? Excellent. So I've given a version of this talk before because you all are very fortunate to have lots of vultures in Loudoun County in the vicinity all year. Two different species, black and turkey vultures, and I'm going to talk about both of them in the presentation, but mostly turkey vultures. And if you have seen the presentation before, it is different. I think I change it a little bit every time I give it, and I haven't given one for you guys for a few years, so it's hopefully different. Anyway, so my name is Katie Fallon, and a few years ago, I wrote a book called Vulture, The Private Life of an Unloved Bird. And then it came out in 2017, but just a few months ago in September, it was republished with a new publisher. So the sort of terrifying thing happened. The original publisher, University Press of New England, went out of business, and all of the hardcover copies had sold and all of the paperback copies had sold. So my book was sort of not really in existence briefly. And then Brandeis University Press, thankfully, republished the book, and it just came out again in September. It's got, the text is mostly the same, but it's got a color cover, and the photo section in the inside is color, which makes it fancier. So anyway, last time I think last time I visited you, I had my friend Boris the turkey vulture with me, and this is Boris here. I believe the presentation was in maybe Lovettsville. It was at a really nice community building with a big hardwood floor, and they said they had dances there. But anyway, this is Boris, the bird I brought to you last time, and she's not here today because I'm at my house, but I'm going to be talking about her and some of her other friends. Boris lives at the Avian Conservation Center of Appalachia, which is a nonprofit organization that my husband and a few of our friends founded in 2012 to conserve the region's wild birds through rehab, education, and research. And Boris is a non-releasable turkey vulture who was shot, and she lives at the ACCA, which is how we usually say it instead of that long name. Boris's roommate is Lou. He's a turkey vulture also, and we have a black vulture named Maverick. And you'll see each of them at some point during the presentation here. So before we talk about just turkey vultures, though, I want to talk about vultures worldwide for just a couple minutes, sort of the big picture on vultures. There are 23 species worldwide, 16 in Africa, Asia, and Europe, so it's 16 in the Old World, and then 7 in North and South America, the New World. Most people agree that the Old World vultures and the New World vultures are not very closely related to each other. So why are there so many more species in the Old World is a question people have asked in the past. Well, Africa, a lot of their megafauna, very large land animals that were alive during the last ice age are still alive. So Africa still has, elephants, zebras, giraffes, other large animals, where in North and South America, most of those big, very large animals went extinct at the end of the last ice age. And some of our large predators and very large scavengers went extinct also. So we used to have more vultures here or additional species of vultures in North and South America, but a lot of the really big ones went extinct. And of course, we almost lost our biggest flying land bird, the California condor, but they're doing a little better now. In the old world, though, 11 of those 16 species are endangered, and 8 of them are considered critically endangered. So they're not doing very well overall. And here, of course, our California condor is critically endangered. And a few, you probably remember in the 80s, in the 1980s, we were down to only 22 California condors. But through captive breeding and re-release, the species is doing a lot better now, but it's still considered critically endangered. You may have heard about a lot of the fires in the Western US that have been happening recently. And in Big Sur, California, the Big Sur Condor Sanctuary burned down. That's managed by the Ventana Wildlife Society. And they lost, I think, about 9 condors in that fire, including 2 in the nest, 2 nestlings, which is really tragic. Worldwide, threats, though, to vultures are similar. They include poisoning, although the type of poison is different depending on where you are in the world. Here in the U.S., the California condor is threatened by lead poisoning, which we'll talk more about in a couple minutes. In Africa, some of the poisoning is due to a couple different reasons. One situation where the vultures are poisoned would be when an elephant is poachers kill an elephant or a rhino and then lace the carcass with carbofuran or another poison with the intent to kill vultures that would land and feed on the carcass. So then the vultures wouldn't congregate in the sky above a poached animal and draw the authorities. In Asia, the vulture crisis in the 1990s, probably a lot of folks heard about. There was a veterinary pharmaceutical called diclofenac, which is an NSAID like ibuprofen or Tylenol, and it was used to treat a wide variety of cattle ailments. And when the cattle would die in India and other parts of South Asia, the carcasses are often left for vultures to dispose of, to eat. But unfortunately, if the cow had been given diclofenac before it died, and then the vulture ate that cow, the vulture would go into kidney failure and die. There are 4 species of Asian vulture that suffered catastrophic population declines, greater than 95%. And they're doing captive breeding programs of them now to hopefully bring back some of those species. Electrocution is a big problem for all kinds of large birds that fly into power lines. Belief-based persecution, vultures are often persecuted for beliefs that humans have that probably aren't true. An example comes from Africa. There is a black market for vulture body parts, especially in southern Africa, where some vultures are targeted and killed specifically for their heads and their brains. And there's a belief that smoking vulture brains, like in a pipe, will give you foresight. So you might be able to tell the future or have a clairvoyant ability because these vultures appear in the sky as if they, have second sight above a carcass. So that's a little bit odd. I haven't tried smoking vulture brains. I don't imagine that it works. But it's apparently causing a problem for some of these large critically endangered species in Africa. One of these vulture species, these African vultures, is the lappet-faced vulture. I should say I didn't take some of these photos. I got them from the internet. I would love to go see a lappet-faced vulture in Africa myself. So you'll notice this bird has a very, very large, strong-looking beak. A bird like the lappet-faced vulture may be one of the first birds at a carcass, and it can really get into and tear open thick hide. Sometimes black and turkey vultures here in the US have trouble kind of getting into a carcass because their beaks are not as large or strong as a bird like the lappet-faced vulture. Here's another old world species, the griffin vulture. Griffin vultures are, they look a little bit like kind of cartoon vultures that you might see. They have a kind of a long neck and they kind of have those hunched shoulders. Griffin vultures are the vulture species that often helps with the Tibetan sky burials. If you haven't heard of this before, You can find videos of it on YouTube if you are ready to see it. It's a practice where folks in some parts of Tibet and some other parts of the world too kind of after they die, give their bodies as a final act of charity to vultures. There's a ritual, and their bodies are left on in a special place, and the vultures come and eat them. And griffon vultures are very good at this job. They're very big. This is one of my favorite species. This is the bearded vulture, also known as the lammergeier, but they are trying to get away from using the name lammergeier, which means lamb vulture. The birds have been persecuted in the past for killing lambs, and they're not believed to actually do that, though. This is a bird that eats mostly bones. You can see he's got bone in his beak in this picture. About greater than 80% of their diet is bones. So they're one of the last birds to come to the carcass to clean up the bones. Sometimes they will hold a bone in their beak like this and fly up high in the sky over rocks and then drop the bone to crack it open to get the bone marrow out, which is pretty cool. Yeah, and then another one of my favorite species, they're all my favorite species, who am I kidding? But this is the New World vulture. This is the king vulture. If you've been to Costa Rica or some other places in the New World tropics, you may have seen a king vulture. They are very large, white, mostly white and black, except for their faces that are these beautiful, bright, very bright colors. And of course, this guy, the familiar California condor, the largest flying land bird in North America, about a 10-foot wingspan. Just an amazing looking bird with a spiky collar of feathers, red eyes, pink skin. This is a bird that was extinct in the 80s everywhere in the US except for the coast of California, where they fed on a lot of marine mammal carcasses that would wash ashore. So if you think about an animal the size of a whale, washing up on a beach, or large sea lions, those are some very big animals, and the California condors on the coast are able to keep the species alive by eating those large marine mammals. Just really cool birds. A great place to see one if you ever go to Arizona. The Vermilion Cliffs is kind of near the Grand Canyon, and if you travel there, you can sometimes see them at one of their release sites, where the Peregrine Fund, the World Center for Birds of Prey, releases captive bred California condors. They just did a live stream to release a few weeks ago. That was really, really neat to watch. Anyway, but back to our big picture. So even though these vulture species, the Old World birds and the New World birds, are not thought to be very closely related, despite that, they're primarily scavengers worldwide. Most of them have strong stomach acid and a lot of beneficial bacteria in their guts that allow them to eat diseases and neutralize them. Dangerous pathogens like rabies, anthrax, botulism toxin, etc. The vultures can eat animals that died of these diseases, and then when in their droppings, the diseases are not present. It's believed that the strong combination of stomach acid and bacteria just fries everything that goes through their digestive system. They quickly and efficiently remove carcasses that might contaminate the rest of the ecosystem, and they also reduce the number and concentration of mammals around a carcass, which is very important. Mammals are sort of gross in a lot of ways, right? And we spread rabies. If we're sharing saliva, swapping saliva, it's a way that rabies can be spread, which of course is a zoonotic disease that we don't want to get. So when vultures are quickly removing these carcasses, that kind of stops mammals that might kind of concentrate and gather around a carcass. So turkey vultures, coming to my favorite species, they're the world's most widespread and probably, or maybe most abundant vulture species. The other species that may be even more abundant than the turkey vulture is the black vulture. It's tough to get a clear sense of how many individuals of each species are in the world, but it's a lot of both species. Turkey vulture definitely has the biggest range, though. They breed from South Central Canada all the way to the tip of Argentina, nearly everywhere in between. Lots of different kind of habitats. islands, coastlines, mountains, forests, deserts. They're really in a lot of habitats. Not quite as close to human habitation as often as black vultures are, but they're really pretty much everywhere. There may be 15 to 20 million turkey vultures in the world, and they're probably about the same number of black vultures. That's a lot of vultures. If you think about a bird like the cerulean warbler, which is my other favorite species, there are probably 300,000 to 400,000 cerulean warblers. So comparing that to 20 million turkey vultures, it's a very successful species, very adaptable. There are 6 subspecies, or usually people say there are 6. There are some folks who say 5, but most people agree 6 subspecies, 3 that breed in North America and then 3 that breed in the tropics. And the different populations have different migratory strategies, which is pretty fascinating. We'll talk about that more in a couple minutes too. But here's the most up-to-date map of turkey vulture abundance. This is from eBird from Cornell Lab of Ornithology. And I find these maps fascinating that are made by eBird data. And here is where turkey vultures are found. The red is where they are just in the breeding season, and then the purple is where they are all year. So if you'll notice that in the eastern US, we've got them all year because our subspecies is partially migratory and is around the southeast all year. But the subspecies in the upper west is considered a complete migrant. So members of that subspecies go all the way to the tropics. And then there's a southwestern subspecies that's considered a partial migrant also. But anyway, we'll talk more about that in a minute. But you can really see they're nearly everywhere except for Chile, the parts of some of Peru where there are the very steep Andes. They're not on the very steep snow-covered Andes mountains. Getting out of the cold is pretty important for turkey vultures and black vultures. So here's the view you're going to get if you're on the ground looking up at a turkey vulture. This is one of my favorite quotes. Let us praise the noble turkey vulture. No one envies him. He harms nobody, and he contemplates our little world from a most serene and noble height. And that's from Desert Solitaire. But when you are out bird watching and you see, this is what you'll see. Undersides of the wings and tail are light. Got a relatively long, thin tail. And you can remember that turkey vultures have silver linings. Certainly turkey vultures get mistaken for eagles quite often. But if you've got that silver underneath the wings like that, that's a good indication that what you're looking at is a turkey vulture. Up close, very handsome. This is Lou, the turkey vulture I mentioned, who lives at the ACCA. Here in the eastern US, they weigh about 4 pounds. The ones in the upper west are a little bit heavier, and the ones in the southwest are a little bit lighter, and the ones in the tropics are a little bit lighter also. But here they're about 4 pounds, 5 to 6 foot wingspan. So very similar to a bald eagle, but weighs less than half of what a bald eagle weighs. Something important to note is that they've got these chicken feet, very chicken-like feet. You can see Lou's feet here. They don't have talons that are made to grab and carry anything away. People will say all kinds of things to me about turkey, make all kinds of claims like turkey vultures carried away, my cat, or a turkey vulture carried away this or that. They can't carry anything in those feet. They're just not made for it. If you've ever seen like a golden eagle or a red-tailed hawk, their halix, the back toe on a golden eagle, is just huge and curled and very sharp, very good for grabbing. And a turkey vulture's halix is almost like a pinky toe. Like it doesn't really seem like it's very functional at all. So they're very good for standing on a carcass and tearing chunks, but they're not good at carrying anything. They drag things with their beaks, but not really with their feet. Up close, this handsome character was a bird that was hit by a vehicle and brought to ACCA for rehab, and we were able to get him back to the wild. So, but not before he posed for some great photographs with his handsome face. So, some things you might notice looking at this: they've got this long hooked beak that's great for tearing chunks off. They can open their mouths very wide to swallow large chunks of food. You might notice while we're looking at the mouth, if you can, hopefully you're able to tell that the tongue has some serrations, sort of like a saw blade. If you look closely at the tongue, you can see them. This helps the turkey vulture swallow its food. So if you imagine what the inside of a dead animal is like, it's very sort of slippery and wet usually. I hope no one's eating. And that serrated tongue helps them swallow those chunks of organs that would be really slippery and might get away from them otherwise. It's that, so that beak and that tongue is sort of like their knife and fork, that helps them. That's how they eat their food. And you'll notice too that the nose, you can see right through the other side. It's believed that turkey vultures can have a very good sense of smell, probably better than most other birds or all other birds. Black vultures don't have a very good sense of smell. They will sometimes follow turkey vultures to food. Um, Turkey vultures are often the first bird to find a carcass, but they're sometimes displaced by black vultures or eagles or other species that are a little bit more enthusiastic about eating. And then, so it's kind of a, it's a rough looking sort of face, but this, just for contrast, turkey vultures have quite a variety amongst individuals, but they all look the same if you are, on the ground looking at them flying in the sky. But up close, you can often tell them apart just by how they look. Some of them look different from others, I think. At least I think so. This is Boris. You'll notice that Boris doesn't really have those warty things on her face, the growths that this bird has. I have not heard a satisfactory explanation for what those warty things are. Some people say that they get more of them as they get older. However, I don't think that's true. It is true that baby turkey vultures don't have them, but Boris is now 5 or 6 years old, and Lou is, I think, maybe 9 years old, and neither bird has any white things on their faces. And the turkey vultures in the tropics also don't have those white warty growths. I'm going to get to figure out what it is someday, what those are. I don't have a satisfactory explanation for them. So turkey vultures are considered obligate scavengers, which means their diet is carrion, dead animals. There are a few documented cases of them eating live prey, but they've been in unnatural situations sometimes, and they're very, very few and far between. There's very few cases of them documented eating live prey, and they're often when the bird can, when a turkey vulture can walk up to something small and just swallow it. So like a small fish that is washed up on a beach and isn't quite dead yet. A turkey vulture can walk over to it and swallow it. But they're just not equipped for killing things. Although they do learn where reliable sources of carrion happen. So if there's a section of the road where things get hit a lot, or if there's a slaughterhouse or a farm where carcasses are deposited, both turkey and black vultures might learn where those food sources occur and congregate in those areas. In comics, there are a lot of great turkey vulture comics. This is one of my favorite that I always like to share. I'm a turkey vulture, yes indeed. My head is bare to prevent rotting flesh from adhering to it. It also might help them regulate body temperature. To keep cool, I poop on my legs and feet, which is another really interesting behavior that turkey vultures do. And turkey vultures aren't the only species to do this. Storks also will do this. Sometimes California condors and other large species will go to the bathroom on their legs and feet. And there's a term for it, and the term is urohydrosis. We usually call it an accident, at my house, but it's an interesting behavior. And then my main defense is projectile vomiting. And that's another one of the very interesting things about turkey vultures. They will vomit when threatened. It's effective at deterring humans. If that gets under your fingernails or in your car, it's a very, very smelly, very gross thing. One of the most vulnerable places for turkey vultures in the nest. So baby turkey vultures in the nest will vomit when they're threatened also. And if you think about things that might bother a turkey vulture in a nest, like a raccoon or a coyote, that vomit might provide an easy meal for that potential nest predator. I mean, I have a beagle at home, and I guarantee she would eat turkey vulture vomit, if given the chance. Probably roll in it too, but it's so it could deter some nest predators, and it could also provide others with a meal. So, speaking of nesting, this is a baby turkey vulture in a nest. Turkey vultures don't build nests, traditional nests. They will nest in caves, cliffs, and abandoned structures like a hayloft or a deer hunting tree stand, an attic of an abandoned house, sometimes in large, very large hollow trees, sometimes even right on the ground under a brush pile. But they don't really build a nest. They can't carry nest material because they don't have those talons. They might move some things around in the ground, like move some leaves around or some small sticks, but they don't really build a nest like we would be accustomed to when we imagine a bird. These are some babies in a hayloft. They kind of just wandered around. This is a hayloft in Western Pennsylvania. You'll notice that baby turkey vultures have black faces, which is different from the adults. Turkey vultures don't get that black or that red head until they're at least a year old, and they don't get white on the end of their beak until they're around a year old. It kind of fades over the course of a year, so it can be a little tough to tell if you're looking at a black vulture or a turkey vulture baby. If you don't know that turkey vultures have white down feathers, these are turkey vultures. Black vultures have buff tannish down feathers, which is really interesting. So if you've got baby vultures in your hayloft, if they've got buffy tan feathers, they're baby black vultures. If they're fluffy and white, they're baby turkey vultures. And oh yes, before I move on, just some sort of facts about turkey vulture nesting. It's a little bit mysterious because they manage to get in these caves that are quite small, and it can be tough to find a turkey vulture nest, and they're not very obvious. There are 2 eggs, almost always 2 eggs. Both parents incubate the eggs and brood the chicks once they hatch, which is after about a month. They're in the nest for quite a long time. They don't leave the nest until they're about 60 days old. A lot of birds, it's closer to a month. A lot of raptors, red-tailed hawks, birds like that. But turkey vultures are there for a long time, 2 months in the nest. And then after they fledge, they will usually hang around the nest for another few weeks until they finally leave the area when they're 12 weeks, 84 days or so old. And it varies a little bit, but once they sort of leave that nest area, they aren't supported anymore by their parents. So it's they're kind of off on their own, and they join all the other vultures at the communal roost, where they can where the young ones often have to perch on the bottom. So you sometimes will see a roost with the birds on the bottom might be the young birds, the ones that get pooped on by the older birds. Just to show you that little face up close. Now that hopefully everybody watching went, "Aw," because that's a really cute, a very cute face. But you'll notice it is quite different from the adult turkey vulture. The red is, they don't get that red head. Even the eye color changes as the birds get older also. So what are we doing in these turkey vulture nests? You have to have a permit to go in and bother birds in the nest. My small organization, the ACCA, partners with Hawk Mountain in Pennsylvania, the USGS, and some other folks. And we travel about once a year to known turkey vulture nests where we take the babies out of the nest for about 15 minutes. And we take some measurements. We take a blood sample and we put a wing tag on the bird that I'll show you in a minute. We almost never see adults. Once the turkey vultures are this size, are big enough that the parents don't have to sit on them and keep them warm anymore, the parents aren't there very often at the nest site. They might only come back 2 or 3 times a day to feed the babies. Otherwise, the babies are just in there by themselves. So it's we almost never see the adults at the nest. So we're taking these blood samples to test for lead. Um, lead poisoning can be controversial because the source of a lot of the lead that poisons the birds is spent ammunition. So if a hunter shoots a white-tailed deer, and we're getting to deer season now, and field dresses the deer or leaves the gut pile in the woods, if you're a scavenger, that's amazing. You know, in a natural system, the big predator came through, made a kill, took what it wanted, left me a gut pile to eat. However, if there are pieces of lead from the spent ammunition in the gut pile, scavenging birds can eat that lead inadvertently, and it can sicken them or even kill them. Lead poisoning has been identified as the biggest obstacle in the way of California condor recovery. And it also, bald eagles are very susceptible to lead toxicity. A piece of lead, the size of a grain of rice, can make a bald eagle very, very sick. Turkey vultures can handle more lead in their systems than bald eagles, red-tailed hawks, California condors. Turkey vultures can handle a lot of lead. So they can be a good species to study to give you a sense of how much lead is out there in the ecosystem. So that's what we are doing when we take the blood sample. If you want to read more about this, I just put on the bottom here, if you go to Google Scholar, you can find a paper. The title is Chronic Lead Exposure is Epidemic in Obligate Scavenger Populations in Eastern North America, which is kind of a mouthful. The short version of that paper is we were able to get about 100 dead black and turkey vultures. Lead cycles through the blood fairly quickly, but it deposits and stays in the bones of birds for a long time. So if you can get bird bones, you can test them for evidence of chronic lead exposure. And that's what we did with these dead vultures that we received. And we learned that 100% of the birds in this study had evidence of long-term lead exposure. So if you want to read more about it, that paper can tell you even more. These are just a couple of pictures. I kind of make my children help. Turkey vultures are a really fascinating species, and I'm always interested in trying to get my kids involved in things. So I put them to work. My oldest daughter's old enough now to take notes. So she's a budding young field biologist. And this is our most recent. We go to this nest every year for about the last 10 years, I would say, maybe 8 years. And this was just this last summer. You can see we've got our COVID masks on. So wing tagging these birds, turkey vultures are not a good species to put metal leg bands on because they expel liquid waste. They go to the bathroom on their legs and feet. So if you put on a metal leg band, that could corrode, or it could also get caked on there and make it impossible to read or injure the bird. So we put these wing tags on the birds, and that also allows a bird watcher on the ground, to read the tag without having to recapture the bird and report the tag. So you could be out bird watching and read this tag, report it to the Federal Bird Banding Laboratory, and they can give you information about who tagged the bird and where. And that happened with this particular bird. This was in 2016. We tagged this bird in Avella, Pennsylvania, which is very western Pennsylvania. And this bird was resighted all the way in West Palm Beach, Florida, less than a year later. So we occasionally get reports of resightings of our birds, but it's usually right around the nests, right around where we tag them. This is the farthest distance that we've ever had one of our tagged birds resighted. And it was a bird watcher just watching birds at a wildlife management area. And he said we were able to be in touch with the person who sighted the bird. He said there wasn't anything remarkable about the sighting other than it had a wing tag. So I think that was really amazing that we were able to get that information. This is about, I mentioned earlier that eastern turkey vultures are partial migrants. This is about as far as an eastern turkey vulture will go. So from Pennsylvania to Florida, they won't go farther than Florida. The western birds go all the way to the tropics, but the eastern birds do not. This is another eastern turkey vulture that we released that came into the ACCA for rehab, and we were able to get a transmitter donated for this bird. It's sort of like a backpack the bird wears. Solar powered transmitter that uses cell phone towers. So if it flies by, I don't fully understand the technology, but basically if it flies by a tower, it kind of pings the tower and then sends the message back to the researchers who are able to kind of track the bird's movements. So we released this bird in Morgantown. So the map on the left, the skinny one, that star is where she was released. And she was released in September of 2014 and went all the way to northern Georgia that fall and back. And you can see she went right over, right down Interstate 81, it looks like to me, on her way south. And if you think about something like Interstate 81, there are a lot of vultures that travel that corridor. The wind is very good. There's roadkill, and also there's hot air that rises off some of those big highways that allows the birds to fly without having to expend much energy, because the hot air rises and kind of makes cushions that the birds can soar along. So they're warm, they don't have to work very hard, and there's a lot of food for them. So we haven't had, and then when she came back, the map on the right shows where she spends the breeding season. She did not return to Morgantown where she was found. She returned to the area where she was initially recovered injured. So that kind of shows site fidelity, which is interesting. We haven't had any data for several years from this bird since the end of 2016, but that doesn't necessarily mean she's dead. That's also when AT&T shut down their 2G cell towers. So apparently there's some that could have caused her, like she has an old cell phone now. And there's no way for us to get her to fix the transmitter, but it's still really neat. As far as I know, this is the only West Virginia turkey vulture to be wearing a transmitter. Other folks, Hawk Mountain has put a lot of transmitters on turkey vultures, and they found that some birds will go again all the way to Florida. Some will go to other places in the South. Some will go to North Carolina and spend the winter. Some will go to Virginia and spend the winter and not go any further south than Virginia. And some will even go to the coast. Some from Pennsylvania might head to the Jersey Shore where it's warmer also. But they don't do a very long, fast migration. They're moving around slowly. They're eating the whole time. And some of them, like where I am in Morgantown, we have turkey vultures virtually all year. They might not be the same birds that are here in the summer that are here in the winter, but we have turkey vultures year round. This is a turkey vulture that's one of Hawk Mountain's birds wearing a transmitter. This is a bird that nests in Leoville, Saskatchewan. And this is one of those upper western birds that's a complete migrant. So they all leave that part of the West. And this bird goes to Venezuela, and she follows nearly the same route down and back every year. And if you've been to Veracruz and seen that river of raptors, going overhead, you might have seen this particular turkey vulture. This is a female bird, and her mate also has a transmitter. So the pair has been together since at least 2007 when they put the transmitters on. As far as I know, the birds are still, at least the last maybe 2 years ago, a year or so ago is the last I heard if they were still alive or not, but I assume that they are. But the male bird goes somewhere different in the winter. He goes further into Colombia, and the female goes to Venezuela, but they come back to the same farmhouse to have their babies every year. And they've been together every year. Turkey vultures are thought to mate for life or to be strong pair bonders, which is pretty amazing. This is one of the birds from the Southwest. The Southwestern subspecies is similar to the Eastern subspecies. They're considered partial migrants. They don't go very far. They may go from southern Arizona into southern Mexico and then back. This is my very favorite thing. This is the map from using eBird data to show turkey vulture movements throughout the year. So everybody watch this map. I could watch this all day. turkey vulture migration. And you might notice when the birds from the north start moving to the south, the birds around the equator start moving south too, which is interesting. I'm gonna play it one more time. Some folks call that reciprocal migration. So when the very large birds from the upper west get to the tropics, that some of the tropical birds move further south. There you see them, which is pretty fascinating. So I want to take a couple minutes and, oh, I didn't mean to play it again. I want to take a couple minutes and talk about black vultures, which you all have a lot of there in Loudoun County. And we have them here in Morgantown all year also. And black vultures have this much worse reputation from than turkey vultures. Most people kind of like turkey vultures. Then black vultures, people get very bent out of shape about them. But look at that little face, right? I mean, how could you not like that? That's a face that you can love, right? Something important to notice about black vultures, they've got black feathers, which is pretty obvious. They have a gray face, so fairly easy to differentiate between a black vulture and a turkey vulture just from the color of the face. But although turkey vultures, again, do have that gray head until they're at least a year old. You'll notice that the nostrils are different though on a black vulture. They're not as prominent as they are in turkey vultures. It's not believed that they have a very good sense of smell. You'll notice that black vultures, that you can see, this is Maverick, the black vulture, one of my buddies. You can see that he's got these big flat chicken feet also. They're not made for grabbing and carrying away. So black vultures, again, can't carry anything very far in their feet. They have to, the feet are very good for standing on something and tearing, helping them to tear chunks off, but they're not good for carrying, swooping down and carrying anything away. The comparison, black vultures from below look like they have white hands, and they're a little smaller than turkey vultures, but it can be difficult to determine that when you're looking at them if you don't have anything to compare them to. But looking like they have white hands from below is a pretty good giveaway. So black vultures, this is the map. I want to show you how these birds are not as migratory as turkey vultures. And you can see too that their range is not as big as turkey vultures. They're mostly a southern species. They're throughout most of South and Central America, but really only the southeastern US. And here I'll play this map and you can see there's a little bit of seasonal movement, but it's not, they're not considered as migratory as turkey vultures. You'll notice they are also not on islands. They are not a bird on Caribbean islands. They're on Trinidad, but they're not on most of the Caribbean islands, which is pretty interesting. There's a belief that they don't like to cross water, although I don't know if that's always true. And you can see they're not all the way to the end of South America. And they're getting up into Canada a little bit in the Northeast, but they're virtually absent from the West. Oops, I didn't mean to play that again. Hold on. So this is good news on the climate change bill, the oil lobbyists one. So some people often ask, why are there black vultures showing up further north? And it's a little bit of a complicated answer. One answer is that the world is getting warmer. So black vultures and turkey vultures are able to stay further and further north in the winter than they ever have been before. However, it's also possible that black vultures and turkey vultures to an extent are sort of reclaiming an area where they had been previously, but had disappeared from due to a variety of factors, such as widespread persecution. You were allowed to shoot vultures whenever you wanted until the 1960s. So they were finally granted protection under the Migratory Bird Treaty Act. And around that same time, we outlawed DDT, the use of DDT in the US, which has been documented to harm vultures, turkey vultures and black vultures the same way it harmed bald eagles and peregrine falcons by weakening their eggshells, not allowing them to reproduce as quickly as they had been in the past. So black vultures, their diet is still primarily carrion, almost exclusively carrion, but they are occasionally reported to eat weak or dying animals. How often it happens is sort of debatable. They know where to find reliable sources of food. So something they're reported to do in some locations is to attack newborn or vulnerable livestock. So what's interesting about this, though, is that it's some locations it's reported frequently, and other locations it's never reported. And there are several groups who are trying to study this to figure out why it's never reported in some places and why in other places it's reported more frequently. One belief is that it's something that the birds have learned how to do, and then they teach other birds in their family groups. Black vultures tend to congregate with their extended family members, and there's the idea that maybe they learn it from each other. It also can be really difficult unless you see a black vulture attacking a live animal. It can be very difficult or impossible to determine if the animal was attacked while it was alive or if it was something stillborn and then eaten by vultures. They will learn. This is going to sound kind of disgusting, but everything, a lot of things like to eat placentas. So placentas are, there's no hide, there's no thick hair on a placenta. It's just a lump of very dense nutritional material. So black vultures and turkey vultures will want to, if something is giving birth, and they learn where things give birth in the field, and they learn where there's going to be a placenta. That they don't have to work very hard to eat. So they will often learn where things are being born and hang out in those areas. But any risk that's real or perceived risk, the birds can seem scary. They're black, they're big. There sometimes are lots of them. If there's any risk, securing pregnant or sick things, or having humans or dogs nearby can help out also. And I'm not going to read all of this quote because that's a lot of words, but here in West Virginia, sometimes people say, oh my gosh, these black vultures, they're invading from somewhere, where are they coming from? They are not native, but they are a native species. And this is John James Audubon's Black Vulture Species Account from 1827, 1838, from Birds of America. And he makes the very same observations that we have about black vultures now. The bird's a constant resident in all of our southern states, extends up the Mississippi, continues all year in Kentucky, Indiana, Illinois, even in Ohio. And along the Atlantic coast, it's rarely seen further east than Maryland. They're a little north of where this is described now, but I've seen articles from Kentucky and Indiana where people are like, what are these birds? We don't know what they are. We've never seen them. Well, they clearly were there 200 years ago. They just maybe haven't been there in the last 100 years. And this description, although shy in the woods, it is half domesticated in and about our cities, where it finds food without the necessity of using much exertion. Hundreds of them are found at all hours of the day about the slaughterhouses. They alight on the roofs and chimney tops, wherever these are not guarded by spikes or pieces of glass. So the birds have been roosting on, your buildings in the cities in the South for 200 years. So it isn't new. They're very good. They've made great use of human subsidies. They've learned how to live around us and eat what we leave behind. These are black vultures. This is Myakka River State Park near Sarasota, Florida, where I took this picture. I watched these birds go around and check all the grills for food. Black vultures will also eat dumpsters, eat out of dumpsters. They will tear into a garbage bag. If they learn that food is inside garbage bags, sometimes they will or if something else has torn open a garbage bag and there's food in there, they will come eat it. Sometimes if you leave cat or dog food outside for outdoor cats or dogs, black vultures will come eat that too. They will eat cow manure, horse manure, vegetables rotting in the field. They'll eat pumpkins. They'll eat watermelons. They have a kind of, it's more than just carrion, even though carrion is the vast majority of their diet. So this has a dead mouse in it. So just FYI, if you don't want to see a dead mouse, just don't watch. But this is Maverick again. I like to include this video because it shows how a black vulture kind of puts their foot. It might put their foot on a carcass and brace themselves, and then reach their head inside and pull chunks out. And he's just maverick. We give him a lot of toys to keep him busy, especially toys like this, like dog toys that you can put things inside that he has to use his beak then to try to get his face inside to get them out. So another thing that Maverick does, and I cannot really explain this, but this bird likes to play fetch with like ball pit balls. So these are plastic balls like from a that you would find in a like an amusement park or Chuck E. Cheese or something. And he likes the purple ones and the orange ones. And then we hide pieces of his food inside these big dishes, and he goes searching through to find the pieces of his food. Uh, so this is not just captive black vultures that will do this. Black vultures in the wild sometimes have been observed playing with soccer balls left on fields, playground equipment, toys left in yards. And again, I don't really have a very good explanation for this. Although that doesn't look like food. There's no orange round things other than oranges. But it's interesting behavior. The birds are very curious about new items. All right, I'm getting to the end here. So I get we need vultures and they're cute, but sometimes vultures scare people. And I think it's mostly because, it's the idea that something is waiting for us to die, right? This says, wait up, guys, here it is. Yep, we're good to go. He's an organ donor. Which can be unnerving to think about. And in the fall, so really this time of year, you start to see a lot of vultures in trees together, roosting together. And, it can be, people have sent me pictures like this and said, Katie, I know you like these scary birds. There are 100 of them in my tree. Do they know something? But so roosts, why do they roost together? And there are quite a few reasons there, but the location is the most important probably. There has to be good wind, there has to be a lot of food, it has to be warm, and then there are social reasons. They can follow each other to food. And of course, black vultures roost with these extended families. But something to remember about vulture roosts, if a vulture roost is good for one group of vultures, it's good for all groups of vultures. So what sometimes happens in the fall, throughout Virginia, and some places in North Carolina, Maryland, 100 vultures will come roost somewhere, and then the town, people will say, we have to get rid of these birds. So the town might come in and shoot some fireworks or hang dead vultures, and the birds leave. And then, 2 weeks later, vultures are back because the roost is still there, and it still has good wind, and it still is warm, and there's still a lot of food. They're just different vultures, probably. Roosts are more like hotels than homes. So it can be difficult to stop birds from roosting unless you remove the roost altogether, or provide, or they find somewhere better to roost. So some fears, do vultures attack people? Only if they're dead. I've never found a documented account of vultures of any species attacking live people. There are tons of instances of vultures eating dead people, which is sort of what they're supposed to do. But mostly they prefer dead herbivores, such as deer, cattle, poultry. This is my daughter, who's 6, feeding Maverick the black vulture. Maverick is the black vulture, the bird that might have the worst reputation of any of birds as a species, but it's the only bird that I let my kids interact with because it's the only bird I know is not going to hurt them. And this is our black vultures. Maverick is a hit with all the kids because he's been trained to eat out of a cup, so you can go and sit in with him and he'll come and eat out of a cup no matter who's holding it. Are they waiting for me to die? No. Turkey vultures don't follow dying animals or people, despite the movies. And, when they do, again, learn where reliable sources of carrion happen. They learn where, again, births happen in the field or where animals are deposited, but they don't follow dying animals. And they look creepy. People will tell me these birds just look creepy, but bald is beautiful, right? But we've all sort of seen this kind of thing in the cartoons or the Westerns, where someone's crawling through the desert, and the vultures are nearby watching. But if this ever happens to you, don't be afraid, just keep calm and carry on. I have a lot of bad vulture puns, but that is my favorite. So, um, we are kind of at the end here of my presentation. Before I'll stop sharing my screen a second in case anybody has questions. But before I do that, this is my email address on here. So if anybody wants to email me anything we don't get to talk about today, I'm happy to try to answer your email in as timely a fashion as possible. Although I have 3 children under the age of 8, and they sometimes make it tough to do anything for more than a few minutes. Um, and this bird, I should say, is Lou, the turkey vulture, at an educational program. You'll notice he's not wearing any equipment. Lou just sort of goes to program. He doesn't go to that many programs, but when he does, he comes out onto a perch, eats a few pieces of food, and then goes back in his carrier. He's a very shy bird. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen. And I see all your faces again, or many of them. And if I have any questions. Oh yeah, I see one here. No, black vultures are expanding. Yeah, they're getting further and further north than we've seen them. Yeah, they are expanding. They're showing up in like New York City, places like that where they haven't been in the past. But some of the areas where people are seeing them for the first time, like Kentucky or Indiana, people are seeing them for the first time, but the birds had been there historically. So they're kind of returning to where they had been. But yeah, there are more and more of them on Christmas bird counts and breeding bird surveys and stuff like that. It's actually a lot less depressing to talk about turkey vultures and black vultures than it is to talk about most bird species. Some of our birds are declining, very quickly. A lot of our bird species are in steep decline, but it seems like the stuff that we are doing is helping black and turkey vultures expand their range and become more abundant. And they, which they wouldn't be able to do if they didn't have enough food to eat.
How many years does a vulture live?
Oh, that's a great question. Oh boy, in the wild, I think in the wild, turkey vulture's record is only something like 15. However, since Hawk Mountain has been putting so many transmitters on birds, and tagging so many birds, these birds are becoming individuals. And I think we're going to find out that they're living a lot longer than we think they are. In captivity, turkey vultures can live into their 40s. I know of several, I think the oldest one I've heard of is maybe like 46. But there are several other turkey vultures that I've heard of that are in their 30s. And of course, under human care, the birds are probably going to live longer than they would in the wild, but I wouldn't be surprised if we've got turkey vultures in the wild living to that age too. We just don't realize it yet. All right, and I've got a question on my Q&A here about the map showing them in the same areas with condors. Yeah, they are. They overlap with California condors, and California condors chase them away from carcasses sometimes too. California condors probably don't have a great sense of smell like turkey vultures do. And turkey vultures use both their eyesight and their sense of smell. They have excellent eyesight and they have an excellent sense of smell. They've even documented them being able to find food that's buried under like a layer of leaves in a forest, or even buried in a shallow grave. There was a really cool paper I read where a farmer was killing groundhogs on the farm and would be burying them in shallow graves, and he would come out and find them dug up, but there would be no tracks leading to it. So he couldn't quite figure out what was happening. So then they finally put people in a blind to watch, and there were turkey vultures that would find them and scratch the loose ground with their feet to kind of unearth the dead groundhogs, which is pretty amazing. They're just cool for all kind of reasons. Here's a question here. Is there a dominant species of vultures between black and turkey vultures? So interestingly, here in North America, the black vultures are usually the more, sometimes they're described as more aggressive at a carcass. They will usually be the black vultures will usually chase turkey vultures away from carcasses in North America. However, in the tropics, when the big turkey vultures, those upper western, very big turkey vultures, go to the tropics, they will chase tropical black vultures away from carcasses. They're just so much larger. So it's so here usually black vultures are more dominant at a carcass, but then in the tropics, the northern turkey vultures will often dominate the tropical black vultures, which is pretty interesting. And then a California condor. Black vultures and California condors don't overlap. However, there used to be a western black vulture that went extinct at the end of the last ice age. And I sort of wonder about, is that why the black vultures haven't spread east yet, or will they? There seems to be a kind of Arizona, they get to about Phoenix and they don't really go any further north, which is kind of interesting. All right, what else? Any other questions? Did I miss anything, or? Or does anybody else have anything? I don't see anyone else asking questions.
Hey, Katie.
Yes.
Do you know of any state legislation that's going to make it more impossible or illegal or something for the ammunition with lead in it?
Oh, well, so lead ammunition has been outlawed for waterfowl hunting since I think the early 1990s. But and I also believe that there was briefly a ban on lead ammunition in national wildlife refuges, and I think that was an Obama executive order, maybe, that was quickly overturned. So I don't know if that will be reinstated or not. In California, there's a ban on lead, I think statewide. I don't know if it's fully in effect or not. And Arizona has talked, there have been people who talk about a ban on lead, but Arizona is working pretty hard, my understanding, they're working pretty hard to voluntarily get hunters to switch. Instead of trying to do something with legislation, they're trying to educate people. Really, nobody wants to, I don't think anybody would want to see a big critically endangered bird dying of lead toxicity. I mean, it's really awful. When we get bald eagles in for rehab, we just had one recently that it died a few hours after admission, and it's really very hard to watch. The birds can't usually stand, they can't control their movements. They can't eat. It's really hard to watch. So I don't know of any sort of nationwide lead bans, but switching, I don't have the prices. I looked up recently on Cabela's website the difference between copper ammunition and lead ammunition for a rifle, and it was not a huge difference in cost. Usually cost is the reason people say they don't want to switch away from lead. I'm not an expert on hunting, but I do know that you have to practice with, if you're switching from lead to copper, you have to practice. So you have to maybe retool your whatever, make it so your target, so you're shooting what you're aiming at. And steel shot is what a lot of people will use, I think, for waterfowl. But I don't know of anything nationwide that's legislation. I think someone asked how are they considered as smart as crows? I don't think so. I don't think anything is really as smart as a crow. Ravens, but black vultures, I feel like they are. It's anecdotal maybe, but I feel like these are smart birds. I work with several non-releasable species: red-tailed hawk, barred owl, peregrine falcon, Cooper's hawks, and our black vulture is just head and shoulders smart, very smart bird. Here's a question: how can we encourage vultures to stay in our area? Yeah, I love that question. Usually people have the opposite question. 2 years ago, there were 100 in the field west of our property and maybe 20 last year. We don't know why the decline. Ooh, that's a good question. I don't know. Eastern birds, it's a lot of their movements, especially during migration, depends on weather and where other vultures are and the availability of food. I don't know what the laws are in Virginia about roadkill, but if you can get yourself some white-tailed deer, put them in your field, that could, I don't know if you own the field or if that's your neighbor's property. Hey neighbor, I just threw a dead white-tailed deer in your yard, might not go over well, but having somewhere to roost and having something to eat is really important for the birds. And there are people, I have friends who in West Virginia, you might have to have a salvage permit. I'm not sure exactly what it is now, but I have friends who used to go find roadkill. It used to be legal to pick up roadkill in West Virginia. I'm not sure if it still is or not, but I feel like it is. Take them home and put them in their fields and put game cameras on them to see what kind of birds and other things show up. And there are some amazing pictures you can get from keeping a game camera on your deer carcass. I used to take roadkill squirrels for a black vulture that appeared injured at my farm. Yeah, it can be actually pretty amazing how black vultures and turkey vultures can be injured and survive for quite a while on their own because they spend a lot of time on the ground and they eat on the ground. Boris, our turkey vulture, we think that she survived for about 3 months before we were able to capture her. And of course, by the time we got her, her injury had already healed incorrectly and she wasn't able to fly well enough to return to the wild. But they can survive for quite a while near the ground, depending on the injury, of course. All right, anybody else? Those were great questions. If nobody has any more, I guess we're finishing up.
Well, it was a great presentation.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. I love talking about vultures.
I can tell. I used to have a pair that would, when an old house was beside me, they would roost there every year, and I would have the babies over here. And then when they tore the house down, they still came back for a while, but they've since abandoned. That's why, I mean, they do come back every year they did. And I don't know what's happened to them now.
There was a farm, one of the farms that we travel to has several barns, small barns, and the birds, we have to check all of them because some years they'll be in one and some years they'll be in another one, kind of on the same property, but they'll sometimes pick different ones for whatever reason. Neat.
But I enjoyed watching them and raising their youngings or youngers, and every year. People thought I was crazy, but I really enjoyed it.
People think I'm crazy all the time. Yeah, I think it's, I think they're amazing.
Yes, they are very fascinating.
Well, thank you everybody for listening to me talk about vultures, and thank you to Loudon Wildlife Conservancy for having me back to talk about my favorite subject.
Thank you very much, Katie. Really appreciate it. Look forward to
Yes,
seeing you
thank
when we
you.
can get together, in person.
Yes.
Thank you, Katie.
Oh,
Thank
It was
you.
great. Thank you so much.
thanks.